Welcome back to Lumify. In this next video, we're going to talk about custom reporting. Lumify has powerful custom reporting features that allow you to build reports on pretty much anything within Lumify. To get started, you want to navigate over to the Custom Reports section in Lumify, which is in the Administrator panel. And click that. You'll get taken to a Custom Reports page. And you can create a new custom report by clicking the three dots and create Custom Report. From here, you'll first be greeted with a list of different types of objects within Lumify. You can create reports on events, contacts, invoices, even songs and playlists, locations, payments, refunds, and expenses. All of these have different capabilities. You can use different columns, different relationships, build different aggregates, and have different conditions on each of these different objects. We'll talk about that in just a second. For this example, let's go ahead and build out a report for expenses. Let's click Expenses. Cool. So let's move over to the Columns, Relations, and Aggregates section. Under Columns, Relations, and Aggregates, you'll see first the section for columns is pre-populated with all of the columns that you have available under the Expenses table. So you have an ID number for each expense, an event ID, which is optional for each expense, the amount of the expense, type of expense, any notes associated with that, created at and updated at, which are both dates or timestamps for when that expense was created or updated. Let's leave all those selected. You'll also see a section here for relations. So because you have an event ID and because you can have events associated with expenses, you can also have a relationship between an expense and an event. Let's go ahead and select that, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. The next option down here is Aggregates. Aggregates allow you to sum up or summarize your data when you build out these reports. So if we add a new aggregate, we can do sum. So for example, if we wanted to know the sum of all expenses, we can do sum and the amount. So that'll add up all of the amounts for the records that are identified in this report. You can also do things like count all of the records that are found for that report. And there's other really handy features like the maximum, the minimum, the average, the median, the mode. We can even do average of amount, so we can see the average expense that we have. Cool. So moving on, we can go to conditions. Now this is where you build out what qualifies for records that should be identified in this report. So for expenses, you might want to have a condition that says where the amount is greater than 0, for example. You might have another condition that says where the year for when it was created, the created at, is greater than 2022. So that means that this will only pull expenses from the year 2022. We can add another condition here, and this is sort of a more advanced topic, but we can select where date created at is greater than, and we can use a field called last run at. So if we type that in, that will only pull in records that are new since the last time that the expense report was run. So if you run an expense report on a monthly basis, this will only pull in records that are new since that report was last run. The last type of condition I want to highlight here is the where like condition. So the where like condition will look at text and find text that's similar to that text. So for example, if we wanted to do notes, if you always put notes into your expenses with a PO number, maybe you always have something like PO number in the comments or the notes section of your expenses, this will only pull in those records. So it'll ignore the records that don't have a PO number. All right, finally, moving on, we're on the scheduling report section. So you can schedule reports to be daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly at your choice, or you can just have run those reports manually. For this case, in expenses, maybe you want to do a monthly expense report. So you want to select staff that should receive that. So maybe just the owner, or maybe just your accountant or your bookkeeper, or someone that helps you with your finances. You can also name this report. So we can do monthly expense report. And you can add any comments or notes if you want. You hit save. Cool. So now that report is built, we can actually add in the columns for all of the things that we set. So now you can see there's column selected. You have conditions, and you have relations and aggregates. You'll also see that there's a frequency associated with that. You'll notice here under last run at that it's blank because this report has never been run. Let's change that. So let's open that report up again and hit save and generate report. And that'll go ahead and download an Excel file. Let's open up that Excel file. All right, so here's the report. You'll actually notice that the report is blank. And this might be because some of the conditions that we added to this. So let's go ahead and fix that. And here's the problem right here. We had where date created at is greater than last run at. In this case, we had never run this report. Let's go ahead and remove that condition. I hit save and generate report again. We'll download the report. And let's go ahead and open that up. And there you go. So here's your report. It's showing you all of the columns that we had selected, the ID, the event ID, the amount, the type, any notes associated with that record, when it was created, when it was updated, and if there was an event associated, that would also be here. Now I actually want to show that to you guys to see how events or relationships, which is what this would be shown here. Before we do that, let's also notice that we are summing up the total amount of all of the records that are responsive. We have a count, and we also have the average of your expenses. Cool, let's take a look at how related events would look in this. Let's go back to our expenses. Let's go to an expense and make a quick edit. So for this vehicle rental, let's go ahead and just select a test event. Smith Joan Wedding, hit save. All right, so now we have an event associated with this expense. Let's go back to that report and let's generate that again. Cool, let's pull that up. All right, so here we go. So this is how events will look, or any relationship for that matter, will look within a report. What it's pulling in is what's called a JSON object. It's a JavaScript object notation format. It's a structured data format that allows you to query on this data if you wanted to. So you'll see here that you have the title of the event, you have an event type, the date, and other metadata that is useful potentially for your reporting. You have an event status, you have the package that is associated with it, you have some add-ons, a location, and all sorts of useful information. And that's how related items will look in your reports. You can also create other types of reports. You can create contracts, you can create invoices, locations, and by default, the column numbers will update. The column labels will update based on the type of report that you choose. The same thing is true for any sort of relations that you might have. So for example, on a contracts report, you'll have a signor, you'll have an event and a recipient, whereas for songs, you might have playlists, versus add-ons, you might have events and packages. So really flexible, really useful. And as always, you have the flexibility of creating schedules that can allow you to automate your reporting.